I have to say, I am so excited to be here. As Heather said, it was 10 years ago, and it was the first time I had ever spoken in the community about digital forensics, and that was at a SANS DFIR Summit. And here I am 10 years later, giving a keynote on AI. 10 years ago, I never would have thought this day would have come, and here I am. So it's just great to be a part of this community. I think you're going to see while you're here, I saw a lot of hands come up. This is your first time at a DFIR Summit. You're going to get to see this community. Yep, exactly. You're going to get to see this community, what we're about, what we do, and how we really help elevate and lift each other up as we learn new things in the community. Now, I have been in DFIR for about 15 years now, and in the IT space for over 20 years. So AI, I think a lot of us have started using AI, right? We have it on our apps, we have it on our cell phones, and we're wondering, how can we use AI in our daily digital lives when it comes to DFIR? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got into AI. Now, it's kind of the same way that I got into DFIR. I actually got my first job in DFIR from a Craigslist ad. Is anybody familiar with Craigslist? I was just out one day looking, kids were kind of finally out of the house. I'm like, I need to do something with this computer science degree. Let me see what's out there. And they needed a computer forensic analyst. So kind of self-taught, self-learned for the first few years. And I kind of feel like AI is the same way. Now, during COVID, I started up an esports league to get women into competitive play, and this was in VR. And as part of that, I had a Discord server, and we had well over 100 teams that were playing each season. Now, I know it's hard to believe, but a lot of times people in a Discord server don't read the announcements, right? So every day I'm logging in, I'm looking at this, my mods are looking at this. It's like, when does the season start? When's registration? I'm like, I just mentioned to everybody this morning and posted that information. I'm like, it's right there. And I'm like, okay, this would be a great opportunity to integrate AI. I will have AI come in, monitor the chats that are unfolding, and anytime it sees a question that's about the league, I'm going to give it the information and it's going to answer it. So now when somebody says, when does the season start? The AI chimes in, okay, it starts, July 2nd. All right, what are the rules? Here are all the rules. And this is a form of what's called RAG in AI. The other thing I started to do was stats. We would actually collect stats in game. And I wanted to give the players a way to ask about their stats. How am I doing this season? How many games have we played? What's my kill to death ratio? So they were able to ask the AI these questions, and the AI would tap into a database, take kind of their natural language questions and answer that. Now, of course, I'm in a Discord server with a bunch of gamers. So I started getting questions like these, how many baby daddies does Concessa have? And the AI kind of doesn't know what to do with that. It looks in the database, finds some stats, says, oh, you got 12 baby daddies. I'm like, okay, this is a little bit of work now. And as these players started asking all these different questions, I saw my usage rates go up, because at this point in time, I was using the ChatGPT API. So I'm sitting here at my desk, and this is just in one day, they ran up about $50 using all the tokens. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm volunteering. This is in my spare time. And I just spent $50 using AI, multiply that out times a month. And that's quite a lot of money. So I started thinking, how can I get away from using ChatGPT and use a local AI? I'm a gamer, I've got some GPUs, I can use those. And I began to realize a lot of what I was doing and volunteering for in this league could directly translate into what we do in digital forensics. I'm accessing a database, I'm asking natural questions to that database, and I'm getting answers. Well, where do our event logs go? They're usually in something like an elk stack, right? A SIM. we're working with that. If you're doing anything like cell phone forensics or looking at internet history, databases are everywhere. And here I am using AI in a league to access those databases, to answer questions. I'm looking at moving away from ChatGPT and using a local AI. Data privacy is a huge concern when it comes to digital forensics and incident response. We can't just go copy and paste our client data into something we're not quite familiar with on all the privacy. Are they training the data with it? What if they get a breach? What is happening with this? You may go read those policies and they may say that they're not doing it, but do our clients feel comfortable with that? Do our attorneys feel comfortable with it? Does our management feel comfortable with it? So a lot of the work that I've focused on has specifically been using local models versus going out into the cloud and using those type of things. Now, why AI now? AI has actually been around for many, many years. Some would argue even centuries, okay? Back in the 1950s, the term was coined. And 1970s, we had AI that be, a grand chess person. Okay, so it's nothing new, it's been around. But why is it so, important now? Why is AI getting used? And really, I think a lot of us would say something like ChatGPT, right? AI has now become accessible to the everyday person. We have it in the browsers, we have it in our apps, we have it integrated with everything. And we're wondering, how can we take this technology and how can we use it, okay? So how do we go kind of beyond this hype of ChatGPT, talking with it, asking it to help us with our reports? How can we kind of go beyond the hype and really tap in and use AI to make us more productive in our jobs, hopefully without getting rid of them, right? I kind of see AI as something like Python. I use Python to help automate things, to help do tasks, to help parse through things, and AI can do that for us. So today I'm going to talk about the ways that I've implemented AI into my workflow, and I hope that you can just take away some ideas of how you might be able to leverage it and use it yourself. Okay, so like I said, I am a big proponent of data privacy. Also of just open source, tinkering with things and learning about them. So the first kind of tip I have for you is to use Ollama and Open Web UI. Ollama is basically a back end that will serve a model up to you. So these can be one of the hundreds, thousands, or millions of models that you can find up on Hugging Face. You can download that right to your local computer and then use a graphical front end called Open Web UI to access that. You can have a completely air-gapped system and work with this setup with a local AI. No reason to use something like ChatGPT or Claude. So if you have any kind of data privacy concerns, this is great. All right, so here's an example of what this looks like. And this is gonna look like just your regular ChatGPT type interface. You're gonna have your questions over here, your chats right here. And if you notice right here, and I know it's kind of small, but this is all running off of my local host. It's in a Docker container. Ollama is just a little MSI you download. You'll be up and running in like 5 minutes. Download the Docker, get that installed, maybe another 5 minutes, and you can begin working with local models right away, okay? So once you have this interface, now you don't have to be worried about taking client data and putting that in another platform. You have complete control of that within your environment. So now we can do something like take maybe some JSON that needs to be parsed out. And instead of sanitizing it before we drop it in a chat dialog box, we can just dump the whole thing in there and have the AI work with us. Here's an example where basically I'm just asking it to analyze the shim cache. Okay, so nothing major here. I'm looking for evidence of execution. So I just drop it in there, copy paste, and I'm saying, hey, can you find anything suspicious in the shim cache? So it's going through, it's taking a look at it, and it's finding executables that are could be potentially bad. Now, for 528, the ransomware course that I teach, along with Ryan Chapman, I'll have to thank him for the shim cache because that's what we're parsing out right here and taking a look at all of this information, okay? So pretty straightforward. This is probably something you're already doing with, our chat GPTs and our Claudes, but here, everything is local, everything is private, and it's kept right within your environment, full control over the data. Now, another way that I have used AI is for translations. A long time ago, I used to do a lot of cell phone forensics, and I'm in Tucson, Arizona, so it is not uncommon in a lot of cases like these to get a different language like Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, and kudos to anybody out there that can speak more than one language, because that is definitely, not something in my wheelhouse. But in my particular case, I had thousands of messages that had to be translated. And, 10 years ago, we didn't have what we have today in order to do it, but we actually had to hire a translator. They came in, they translated all the messages. That took a couple of weeks. The attorneys had to review it. We had to go through all those messages. And large language local models, this is something that they really excel at, is translating different languages. Some of them are trained on 6, 10 different languages. So if you have some real obscure language, there might be a fine-tuned model out there that you can use to do the translations. Okay, so here's an example of some data that is taken from a phoner app. Within this, you can see we have some epoch timestamps right here. We have some messages that are in Spanish. And just looking at this data right here, it would be very hard for you to go through here and be like, okay, this person sent this message at this point in time. This is what the message said. Now we can take something like this and we can just give it to the AI and have it translate that information and convert some epoch timestamps as well. So here I am basically asking this local model. And once again, this is all being done locally. So I don't have to worry, about that data privacy and that, this might be put in some training data somewhere or recorded by another company. So now the AI goes through, translates those messages, it goes through the XML, it goes through the JSON, and now I get a nice, printed list of each text message along with a timestamp and a translated message. So now instead of going through that whole process of involving a translator, this is all done real time for me in a matter of minutes. Now, a way that I have also scaled this up is I am a director at IDX, so I do consulting work in digital forensics and incident response. And one of the things that we do are cybersecurity assessments. We'll do reviews of that. And we had a client, all of their documentation was in Spanish. So we're talking, 127 pages, 40, 50 documents all in Spanish that I have to go through along with my team and do an assessment on. So I was basically able to chunk up each one of those, feed it to the LLM, have it translate it, and then also just give me assessment. Where are the strengths? Where are the weaknesses? I also was able to use RAG, so basically ingesting that data into Open Web UI, which has built-in capabilities to do RAG, which is basically like talking to or chatting with your documents. I could say, hey, what is their password policy? Which document is it in? And what is it? Do they have password requirements? Does it have to be changed so often? And with a couple of seconds, it's looking through all of that documentation and says, yeah, it's defined right here in their IT security policies. And although they mention they have to have passwords, there's no mention that they have to be a particular length or reset at any particular point in time. So the AI is very proficient about doing those kind of things. However, one thing that we know about AI, and a lot of you probably know, is that it is not always correct. You can have hallucinations, give you completely wrong answers. So here's an example of just that. I parsed those text messages, I got them translated, but I did this twice and it gave me two completely different timestamps, okay? One is January 16th, one is January 22nd. And spoiler alert, neither one of these are correct, okay? So what's going on here? Well, it's the way that AI works, specifically these natural language ones. They look for probability in the way that they give you your next answer. So somewhere on some website, there's probably epoch timestamps, someone's showing them in their code. So they're working off of probability, and it's not actually doing the math or the function on the back end to convert the timestamps. It's just putting it there based on probability. And I'm sure you probably ran into something like this. I was out on vacation. I was waiting for an event to start, and I'm like, I'll play a word game with ChatGPT. I've got nothing else going on right now. So I started a word game, and it's like, all right, ready to guess your next word. And I'm looking at this going, tamale? What, like, I don't know what this word is. I'd already tried S. That didn't work. So just out of, desperation, I tried the letter P. And I'm like, this isn't going to work, but I really don't know what else to do at this point in time. Okay, so the AI is like, correct, P. I'm like, pample, like I have no idea what this word could be. And it's like, you got it. So it did a couple of things here, right? It put S in there, which I'd already guessed. It put the P in, which I gave it. And it's like, you got this right. This is great. You're doing good. Because, ChatGPT is like, all rainbows and flowers. You're doing a great job. But then it's like, wait a minute. This word this doesn't make sense. Okay. And then it's like, this is the correct word. It's salmon. I'm like, are you crack GPT? What just happened? Like, you said P was in there. I did a great job. I got it right. It's not in there. I guess S. You didn't put it in there, and now it's salmon. Like, what is going on, right? And this is, at its heart, one of the core issues we are going to face with using AI in our workflows. In our field, we always have this concept, trust but verify, and that is with our tools. But now, working with AI, you're going to see this everywhere. Okay, advisor, I have a little, health tracking ring on. I can go in and talk to the AI about my stats. Advisor can make mistakes. Okay, Copilot, use your own judgment. Copilot can make mistakes. Gemini can make mistakes. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Claude can make mistakes. What? How are we supposed to use this technology in digital forensics if AI out of the gate is making mistakes? Are you crazy? If I said, here's Eric Zimmerman's tool, it parses jump lists, but it makes mistakes, okay? How many of you would be like, I am on that. I'm gonna use this tool. Or would you go find another tool? Why are we so hellbent on using AI if it can make all of these mistakes right out of the gate? So we have to learn the proper time and the places to integrate AI. And as I go through the rest of my presentation, I'm going to give you some ways to kind of mitigate those issues. Okay, so other ways that we can use AI. Now, AI is kind of a snapshot in time. The model that you download from Hugging Face, the training stopped, they pushed out the model. It does not have access to, if I told it to go look up an IP address, it doesn't have access to real-time data, if you will. So there are ways that we can basically give the AI tools to work with, okay? So we can API calls out to things like abuse IP, look up an IP address. We can give it custom functions. So I parsed those text messages earlier, and it totally flubbed on the epoch timestamps, right? Completely wrong. Well, I can give it a tool now to convert epoch timestamps. So now I'm beginning to kind of mitigate, it just going out and making things up by giving it tools to work with. We can elevate that and take it even further. It might go make an API call for me, and it might go and convert an epoch timestamp for me. The next thing it can do is I can give it an agent to basically do some reasoning on top of that with the tools that I've given it. So for instance, it could go take something like base 64, decode that base 64, then maybe inside that base 64, it finds an IP address. So it says, okay, I used one tool to decode the base 64. I'm going to use another tool to get the IP address. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to get some results. And then after that, I'm going to be like, am I done? Have I done everything that I was asked to? And it's going to make a decision. So it can go through this iterative process. And this, I really feel, is where we can start to leverage AI in our deeper workflows. Just like I use Python to help automate things, now I can have the AI start to automate things and do things on the back end that I would normally do. Okay, so one of the things that I use it for all the time are API calls. If I'm working a business email compromise case and I come across an IP of interest, or if I'm working a case where an RDP server has been popped and I have an IP and I want to check it, I can give it to the AI and it can go do these lookups. It can check abuse IP, quality IP score, come back, look at the results. It will analyze the results and then give me an assessment based upon that. Lima Charlie has some built-in support for MCP servers, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. You can connect into SentinelOne. So I have basically an AI that can use the API for SentinelOne, go pull query data, get those results, and then do some analysis on it, and then tap into things like our threat intelligence feeds. So here's just a little example here. At IDX, we use something called Mattermost, and I just wrote a little bot that will do exactly that. So I will go in and I will say, hey, can you look up the IP address right here? So a couple of things are going on here. One, I just asked this bot to do something in natural language. All right, and if you think about that, I could do something like this with just like a / command or something like that very easily. But sometimes you have 20, 30 commands you can't remember. And since this bot can go do a couple of different things, the first thing it just decides is, okay, Mary's asking to go look up an IP address. What tools am I going to go use to do that? Okay, so these are all the tools I'm going to go. I'm going to go do IP quality score, IP abuse. I'm going to check a bad list to see if this IP address is inside there. All right, so pretty straightforward. Let's see from here. It is basically going to pull that information down, and then it is analyzing the results of it. And at the end of that, it's going to give me an assessment on what it thinks about that IP address. So I'm kind of scrolling back here a little bit, bring this up, okay? So it says this IP address is definitely suspicious. Here are the various reasons why, whatever, it's associated with the VPN, maybe Tor, and then it prints out a little chart of which, what it found and what tools it used. So once again, kind of mitigating the likelihood that it's hallucinating or making things up. But to take it even further, I've also supplied just the raw results of that tool so that I can go in and I can do my trust but verify step. So this might seem pretty simple or seem pretty basic, right? We're just doing API calls. We're having the LLM analyze the data, but it's just saving me that much more work. While it's off running this and doing an assessment, I'm over here looking at the next IP. I'm over here, doing some work. And then I'm like, yeah, I was checking an IP address. And I go back into Mattermost and I take a look and I kind of see where the LLM is with that and, what its assessment was. Okay, so that's, one of the things that I've really enjoyed using AI for. So now we're going to kind of elevate that up to the next level. We have some tools that have been used. It's been, one and done. They go run the tool, come back, analyze it, give you your results. The step up from that is we're going to create an agent. And now we're going to give the agent multiple tools to use. It's going to decide which tool to use. And then based on the output of that tool, it will decide what the next step is that it needs to take. And a great example of this, I think, is our 7045 service event log entries, which we see with a lot of things like Cobalt Strike. there will be a base 64 encoded payload. Not only usually is it base 64, there'll be some kind of compression associated with it, gzip compression or PowerShell compression. And then once you decode that, sometimes there'll be another layer of base 64. Now, if you've ever tried to write something like a Python parser for this, one of the issues is you kind of have to write these regular expressions for each way that this can happen. Base 64 might be B64, or base 64 encoded might be -en, might be -e for encoded. So as you're going through all these layers, you have to figure out how that's going to work. And then sometimes they will change up the way that it's happening throughout different, I might have 5 or 6 different ways in a case that this malware or this payload has been encoded. Well, guess what? Our AI is really good at taking a look at that, just like we are, and saying, this is base 64. It doesn't really matter if it's B64, base 64, whatever. I can tell that it's this. The same thing with the compression. It'll see the word compression, and it'll figure out what tool it needs to use. So I have a little Jupyter notebook here, and I'm actually going to walk you through and show you how simple the Python code is in order to do something like this. And I use something called Llama Index to do my agents and my tools. Okay. And if you're like, I don't know Python, I don't code very much, really, it would take AI maybe about 10 minutes to work with you to get something like this up and running. ChatGPT is very good at that. And in fact, helped me just craft this example in probably 10 minutes to run through with you right here. Okay, so it's not, I know it's code, but it's pretty easy to get there nowadays. Okay, so the first thing we do is we just import some libraries to work with. Okay, base 64, gzip, request if we want to make a request. Now we just make our functions that we are going to have for the AI. So various things like our base 64 tool, our gzip tool, and our tool to go look up the IP addresses. So these are all simple functions, maybe 5 or 6 lines of code. After I've defined the tools or the functions for the AI, I'm basically just going to write another line of code that explains to the AI what these tools are. Okay, so I have a tool, I'm declaring a function tool, and that's going to be extract my base 64 from the service. I'm going to decode, so I want a function now to decode and decompress that zipped data. And then if you find an IP address, here is something where you can go do a lookup on that IP address to get more information from it. So pretty straightforward. We're just going to let the AI know what kind of tools are available for it to use. Once we do that, we are going to define basically what AI we would like to use. Now, I wanted to mention really quickly here something called Open Router. Open Router basically has hundreds of models on there that you can call with a very simple API call. And this is what it is, maybe 4 or 5 lines of code right here, and you can tap into all the models that they have. I can't speak to the privacy policies on them, but what it's very good at doing is letting you prototype different models. You want to go try that new DeepSeek that everybody's been talking about? Open Router has it. Okay, you want to go try the new Llama that just dropped? Open Router has it. Go get an API key. Some of these providers will offer it for free, and you can just go try it, see what it's like, and see if it might work for your workflow. So Open Router, it also uses something called the Open API interface, which is basically code that you reuse very easily for all your applications, whether you're talking to ChatGPT, whether you're talking to a local model. All you really have to change is your base. So this could be localhost and then the port that a Llama is running on, or it can be ChatGPT, or it can be Open Router, wherever it is that you want, seamlessly changing the LLM that you're working with. Okay, so we're just going to run some code, let it know what LLM that we're using, and just do a simple hello world, make sure everything's up and running and working correctly. Okay. The next thing we're doing is we are going to define the agent. Okay, so right here, we have our tools. We told it, these are your tools that you have available to you. Now I'm actually going to make the agent. And the agent is going to be responsible for doing that reasoning process and deciding what tools to use. And it's really just one line here. I'm going to tell it what model to use. I'm going to say, here are the list of tools that you can use. And let's do it in verbose mode so that I can see your thought process as you're using these tools. Okay, so we get that going. And then the next thing, ignore that. That's just like a library that's getting deprecated. So that code will have to be updated at some point in time. We're going to give it the event log. So this is where you could automate it. If you have a whole CSV file of these event logs, you can just loop through and do this for every single entry in there to go through and decode it. Okay, right here, I'm just giving the LLM the instructions now. This is the prompt. Can you decode this and let me know if there are any IOCs? Maybe throw in some recommendations in there as well while you're at it. Okay, so once we do this, we go ahead and we give it the directions, and it's going to start going through and decoding that data. Now you're going to see two different colors here. The magenta is basically the thought process of the AI, okay? I need to use a tool to extract the base 64 string. And then right below it, you can see that action it's deciding to take. It's going to use that function, extract the base 64 from the service. So it was able to look at that PowerShell code and go like, okay, the first step I need to take is just to do that first level of decoding. Awesome. It's going to go through there. It's going to basically determine what the base 64 is and automatically pass that base 64 into the function. And then right here in blue, that's our decoded output. And then the next thought from the AI, I need to decode that base 64 encoded in gzip. So basically it made it past that first round, and now it's identified the next round that it needs to go to is gzip compressed. So now I'm going to use the next tool to do that, which is our decode base gzip. So it's going to go through there, and it is going to, once again, automatically recognize what it needs to send to the function and decode it. So right here, we have our decoded payload with an IP address that is in it. So just scroll back a little bit. Here is our IP address. Great, it found that. So now, once it finds that, it's like, okay, now I can go do a lookup on this IP address. It goes and it does the lookup and it gets the information to it. And it's like, okay, I'm done. Now I can go in and make my assessment of it. And it goes through and explains exactly what that PowerShell script is doing. So it's decoded it, it's looked up the IP address for us, all within a matter of minutes. And this is where I'm talking about where I really think we can kind of get beyond just dropping something in a chat box and asking the AI some questions about it or to do something. We can begin to integrate it and really automate some of these workflow processes that we deal with in digital forensics. Okay, this is just a slide for our OpenAI API. And like I was saying, this is just a common way that you can, and this is using Python, connect into these different providers. So here is what it would look like if I'm tying into Llama in using this. So, and this is just an example of OpenRouter and all the different type of models that they have up there. You can access DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Qwen, hundreds of models up there that you can tie in and use. Okay, next are MCP servers. Okay, so hot right now. Okay, I'm sure if you're into AI or heard about it, everybody's talking about MCP servers. Now, what's really great about these, we talked about tools, we talked about agents. Our MCP servers basically let us put a wrapper around that and serve it up as an API. So now if I just wrote those tools for you, I can basically make a little server in the office, and you can use this protocol basically to connect in and to use the tools that I just wrote, and it'll automatically have that reasoning applied to it. It's pretty, we're just kind of taking everything again just to the next level, our MCP servers. Okay, Velociraptor, great open source tool. There is the Velociraptor MCP server that basically lets you connect in and do all sorts of collections. So if you're not familiar with Velociraptor, it's basically a client that you can push out to a bunch of different endpoints. They're on the endpoints. Now you can ask the AI to go do something. Can you find anything suspicious on this person's computer? It's going to say, okay, what tools do I have? I'm going to go pull the user assist. I'm going to go pull the prefetch file. And maybe based upon some of the outputs there, okay, I found something suspicious in the user assist. Now I'm going to go check the MFT and see when that was created on the system. Is that within the time frame of what happened? Okay, so adding in an MCP server is pretty straightforward. Not only can you have them locally, so here I went to the GitHub, I've downloaded the code, and basically within Claude, I'm just adding in a configuration. Okay, call Python and point it to my MCP bridge. And this is just basically a file that has a bunch of tools that were defined, just like I showed you in that example with the base64, okay? So it's just pointing it right to there. Other people have published these, like Airbnb has one. You can run searches across Airbnb. They basically just give you the URL and the information that you need to plug in. So within a couple of minutes, you now have full access to do this type of thing. So here I am interacting with the Velociraptor MCP service. Okay, can you check for any suspicious entries in the user assist in the user PC system? Okay, so two things the AI is doing right here. I gave it a host name, user PC. It's tapping into Velociraptor, and it's finding out what the unique ID basically of that system is, because it's going to need that unique ID to continue the queries that it does. So it's already, going through its thinking process right here. Okay, it found the user PC, it's got that client ID. Now that it has the client ID, it can go query the user assist, queries the user assist, pulls down the entries, and then gives me an assessment of those entries. The next step is I might say, hey, can you go look into this bot executable that you found more? And it might say, okay, to do that, let me go check the prefetch and BAM and these other keys, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so very powerful tool that we can use as forensic examiners. Now, I anticipate, although it may not be there, Sentinel-1, Lima Charlie, like I mentioned before, already has an MCP server. So once they start providing us these MPC servers across their APIs, think about how powerful this is. Right from within Mattermost, I can just post a message instead of logging into Sentinel-1, trying to remember what my queries are, clicking through all the menus. I basically give some directions to the AI, it's off and running, and it kind of starts to do its own little investigation, and it's going to come back to me and give me some results, which is, I think, pretty cool. One of the hugest issues we run into with AI are limitations of context, how much data we can give it. Now, the amount of data that we can give it is growing and growing and growing. It used to only be like, about 4098 context window. Now it's like, 100K context window sizes. So it's growing. But the more data you give it, the longer it can take to get results. And in my opinion, increases the likelihood of getting those incorrect answers, because it's a lot of data for the AI to keep track of. So in digital forensics, a lot of times, and especially incident response, we are dealing with massive amounts of data. So unified audit log, right? A client that may have 1,000, 1,000 people in its tenant, right? Event logs across an environment that has hundreds, if not thousands of systems. We cannot just dump that into a chat window. We can't just feed it a giant CSV file and expect it to do that for us. So when I was running the esports league and wanting to query the stats, I found something called Vanna AI. And Vanna AI lets you take your LLM, basically connect to a database, ask it questions, and it will translate that into a query. But what's nice about Vanna AI is it actually trains the AI as you go. So as you're talking to it and as you're asking it questions. So here I have an example where I loaded up the Shrum database. And I just asked, what are the top days with network traffic sent? Okay, so it's going to go through, it's going to think about this, and it is going to translate this basically into an SQL query. So this is one way we mitigate issues with the LLM hallucinating. I can see the query right here, so I can check that to see if this query looks accurate, okay? Does that look good? And then it's going to give me an answer here, and on top of it, it's going to make, you know, a nice little chart for me too. So immediately I can see July 15th right here has a huge spike in activity. So that's going to be where I want to pivot to next. And this is how we can begin to work with data basically at a larger scale. I'm not restricted now by a context window or a context size. I can now work with the LLM to query that data. So on something like event logs, I could basically train this model to understand if I ask for suspicious activity, that can include 5 or 6 queries. Maybe it's checking the RDP logs for, you know, event ID 21, which would be a remote connection, or 4624, or brute force activity. So it's a great way to be able to work with the AI, train it to understand what you're asking for, and be able to give you those results in a fast way. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show here is something, it's a pet project of mine that I've been working on. Honestly, I was hoping, I know Heather mentioned something about writing some code and releasing it. I usually like to try and do that when I give a presentation, so you have the opportunity to work with it and to see it in action. Fortunately, July was just a very busy month for me. But in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be posting this on my GitHub. And the next step for me was pretty much taking everything and using something called LangGraph to make a full-featured AI that will go through and do a business email compromise case. And it basically thinks like an investigator. So when we're working an investigator, you know, and like maybe business email compromise cases, I might be like, okay, I'll get some background information. The first place I'm going to go check are the logins. I'm going to look for any IP addresses associated with a VPN provider. Once I find those IP addresses, I might go and I might get some session IDs. Then I'll check those session IDs to see what activity is associated with them. Might do something like check the inbox rules. I go through this iterative process. When I look at the session IDs, I might get some additional IP addresses I didn't know before. So now I kind of have to go back. I have to recheck the logins and see if those new IP addresses show up. And then finally, when everything is done, I'm going to generate a report on all of my action. Okay, so this is just a little demo of the code that I've written so far. And I know it's a little bit hard, so I will to see. So I'll zoom in on it. But basically, the first thing I do is just give the AI some background to work the investigation. So, you know, our typical things, you know, that you get from the scoping notes. When did this incident occur? When did it happen? And then after I give that information to the AI, you can see the AI is beginning the analysis, and it gets to decide on what it wants to do. So it says, okay, I'm checking what you told me. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to go query the logins that happened. Now, I showed you Vanna. I have actually given Vanna to the LLM as a tool. So now the LLM is like, I get to use Vanna as a tool, and Vanna is going to let me query logins. So let me ask Vanna a question. What are the login activities for Mikasa? And it actually gives a time frame right here. So instead of me coming up with the query, the LLM is coming up with the query that is going to be passed to Vanna, or the question, I guess you can say. So once the LLM asks its question, I want to check for these event logs. Vanna is going to go off, generate the query, and pull the event logs for the logins. So Vanna's off and running. I've got some truncated output, and it found these logins during the time frame requested. So now the LLM is taking the results basically from that query against the event logs, and it's analyzing those results. It's going to take a look at those results and see if it can identify anything suspicious. And then after it does that, it is going to decide the next step that it wants to take. Okay, so now it's taking a look at those logins. It's maybe checking for bad IP addresses. It could do things like check for browser strings. Oh, forgot to hit the play button. The nice thing about using a framework like LangGraph is this is a pretty small model that's going through and doing this. It's a 32B model versus something like ChatGPT. Okay, so here it found some suspicious IP addresses, and it's decided that it wants to go get more information about these IP addresses. So very similar to what we do as investigators. We find something suspicious, we're going to look into it deeper, and that is exactly what the AI is doing right here. So it keeps going through this process. Once it finds the IP addresses, it's going to go find the session IDs. Once it finds the session IDs, it might decide it wants to go find the mailbox rules. When it queries the mailbox rules, if it finds any new IP addresses, it's going to pivot off of those IP addresses and then go check in for those logins. So it's going through the entire thought process of an investigation within a matter of minutes. And at the very end, when it's all done, it will decide to generate a report with its findings. And that's what we can take as an investigator. Now, would I rely on that report and be like, done? No, right? Trust but verify. This is a starting point for me to do my work. So maybe I've pulled the logs. I've got 10 other things going on. I got to jump on a call. I point the LLM at this. I let it take the first pass at the data, see what it comes up with. And now when I start my investigation, I basically have a starting point that I can use from the AI. So let me pull up that report again. Okay. I basically have a starting point, right? This is what I can use. It identified these IP addresses for me. It found these inbox rules. It tells me what those are doing. They're moving things to the RRS feed. They're forwarding things to invoices. So now I've been able to incorporate that into my workflow. Okay, that's pretty much bringing me to the end of my presentation. I know I talked about a lot of different tools that I use and things that I do. So here's kind of like my one slide with all the links: Llama, Open Web UI, Vanna, MCP Velociraptor, Llama Index, LangGraph, Open Router. And then of course, if you're interested in this and you've liked what I've been talking about, I will be, as Heather said, hopefully soon, turning in my course 4563, where you will get to learn to do all of this with a local LLM. The cool thing is you can very easily pivot it right to using ChatGPT or Claude or any of those, as long as they support that open API protocol, which a lot of them do. So thank you for your time today. I am really excited to see what we could do with AI in this industry, knowing its limitations and how we can work with it. Like Heather said, there's that new initiative that just came out. So if you're working with AI, come up and talk to me. I'd love to hear from you over the conference. Thank you.